Hello again, friends. I am very pleased to say I've actually got started on this recording still while it's still Sunday. Although by the time most of you see it, it's probably going to be on Monday again. Not all my fault this time. It was a technical glitch, which may play out in a few minutes, but we'll see. Anyway, good to see everybody again. Thank you for the ongoing support and comments and so on. Today, we're talking about the global implications, if you like, of Marine Le Pen being jailed and banned from running. As you can see here from the opening slide, I should introduce myself, Stephen Manning, Integrity Ireland, S.O.S, which is one of the books we did on the criminality in the Irish courts, Truth Matters. And yes, for the first slide here, give you the full text. Le Pen in the pen. Lawfare versus the rule of law, maintaining EU globalist inclusion using politically appointed judges and corrupt courts at the direct cost of democracy and fundamental human rights. So that basically sums it up. Those of you that know me will know that I've had a background in not only in psychology and religious studies, but I've also had quite the what do they call it? The introduction by fire, I've forgotten what they call it, in the Irish legal system as a victim very much, or at least a victim that fought back as best as I could until they started coming after my children and so on. So I'd have insights in all of these areas, and I hope that as we move through the slides here that we make some solid points about what's really going on. So we start off here now with Marine Le Pen, and she's far. Of course, they're labeling her far right. That's the prevailing status quo, which is basically far left. They label people far right to, it's just it's slander of sorts, But anyway, she's been banned from the 2027 presidential race, throwing French politics into disarray. Why? Because France, of course, as we all know, is supposed to be a democratic republic. It's far from it, I might add. She accuses the Paris judge that delivered the guilty verdict against her earlier today of handing down a political decision, and the court of attempting to block her from running in the 2027 presidential election. Le Pen claims that the rule of law was totally violated. She described today's verdict as a political decision and proclaimed her innocence, arguing the judge in charge of the case had yet to provide an explanation for the ruling. Well, it doesn't really matter, does it? And again, that little booklet on the right is a book that we produced, Indictment and a Petition for a Public Inquiry into State-Sponsored Criminality in Ireland. It's all on the same page, my friends. We'll keep moving through. Got quite a few to get through again, as usual today. So here we now hear that the judge, which is a lady called Bénédictine de Perthuis, or Perthuis, or however they say it in France, she has apparently come under some death threats. Well, so the media are telling us, but of course the media, which according to the French commentators is 90% left-leaning anyway, and pro-establishment and all that sort of stuff. This woman is leading the charge, not the judge, but Le Pen. She's leading the charge, right, to be possibly the next president or whatever of France, and it's got the prevailing status quo terrified. Democracy has gone out the window. The rule of law has gone out of the window. Anything, it's, and here's a little quote below it here from this commentator. French presidents such as Jacques Chirac and Nicolas Sarkozy have been convicted before. All right, so she's not the first senior political figure. Controversy is flaring because Le Pen was given an extra punishment, the immediate ban on running for political office starting this week. Now, why did this judge, de Perthuis, do this? Well, apparently it was just an add-on impulse on her part, though I'm fairly sure it's a carefully thought out impulse, okay? But it was, obviously, they're using the law, they're using, I'm saying, corrupt judges, morally corrupt, legalistically corrupt, to do their bidding. And I took this off a French website over there on the right-hand side. And of course, the reason I've put this woman's picture up here is precisely because I'm in that camp that believes public officials, people who are receiving money from the public purse, whenever they do things that are questionable or irregular or arguably politically motivated like this, especially when they're judges, they need to be named and shamed, because the sooner we correct this, the better society is going to be. So the phrase in French there basically said that this woman judge, and it's by a French commentator. I'll read a little bit of his comments there in a moment. This French judge is down there, bottom right, the cochon de Macron. Okay, so the cochon was the name of a bishop, the same bishop who railroaded Joan of Arc back in the day on the orders of the English. They were complicit in it as well, the clergy and the hierarchy, and they all worked in cahoots. They couldn't actually find a crime that Joan of Arc had committed, so they just invented it. And they managed to get her on 70 charges and burnt her, as you probably, if you know your history, burnt her at the stake as a heretic. Now, what this man now says about her, and I like this because, now I've amended it slightly because it didn't translate perfectly out of French, but I've amended it slightly. I'm pretty sure this is an accurate summation of what he was saying. His name is up there on the left there somewhere, Cedric somebody, top left. Okay, if you want to check him out. He says, there are in our country 3 common cliches that I can no longer stand. I'd be the same now as far as Ireland is concerned. Number 1, you don't criticize a court decision, or one is not supposed to, or one is not allowed to criticize the courts. Nonsense and balderdash. When they're engaging in criminal activity, it's your duty to challenge them. Number 2, such a trial like this is not political. The justice system is independent. Absolute nonsense and utter tripe once again. The so-called separation of powers, where we're supposed to have 3 separate, you have the executive, you have the legislative, and you have the judiciary. They're all supposed to be operating separately in order to counterbalance each other and ensure, number 1, the rule of law, number 2, that democracy is as close to the true natural model of democracy as possible. But it's long since been abandoned. It's the lie, the pretense of democracy must be maintained, whilst the system and the globalists and the hierarchy and the cabal, or whatever you want to call them, hijacks all of these instruments of governance for their own nefarious ends. And just an interesting little ploy. I'm sure this will really annoy them, and frankly, you deserve it, guys. With people being arrested for putting memes and such like up online, Thirdly, he talks about the shouting from the naive and the imbeciles, quote, I trust the justice of my country. And this man, Cedric, says, I, an old reactionary, trust honest and sincere people, not a politicized, partisan, and revanchist justice. I had to look up that word myself. I've never seen it before, but it comes from the root for revenge. So justice that is being used, or the instruments of justice are being used for political vengeance. That's what's going on here. And one of the quotes, I think, from Francois Mitterrand, one of the previous presidents of France, is, whoever wants to kill his dog accuses him of rabies. Beware of the judges. They have killed the monarchy. They will kill the republic. Because it was the judges, of course, who were instrumental in beheading Marie Antoinette and co. back in the day. And not that I've got any particular commentary on that either, but it's about the abuse of power, guys. And what's the alternative? We'll touch on that here today. There is an alternative. Most people haven't grasped it yet. They haven't seen it, because we've all been trained and conditioned to believe that the way the system operates is the only way, and we've just got to adjust to it. I'm saying, no, it's time to make sure the systems adjust to us. Yeah, and by us, I mean good, honest, decent people who are trying our best to make the world a better place. So, yes, just by, again, a commentary there at the right. It just so happened, he makes mention in his article, the French guy, Cedric, about she's acting just like a cochon. Now, not a cochon, a cochon, which is the name of the bishop, Cauchon. But as you can see, it's very, very close to the word for a pig. I just put that down there because I went looking to see what he might mean, but that's the only. So I don't know if the author was referring to this most noble, gentlewomanly justice and judge of the French courts as, but maybe he was. Who knows? Now, I'm going to try something here now, guys. I'm going to present something to the stage, I hope. Let me just 1 second now. I'm going to remove this, see if this works. This is about a 1.5 minute clip. I'm going to let this lady say, really, as well as anybody could say it, what has just happened to Marie Le Pen. Hopefully this will work, guys.
Okay, so the lawfare being used against right-wing politicians in Europe is being taken to a whole new level. Marine Le Pen, the leader of Rassemblement National, the populist right-wing party in France, has just been sentenced to 4 years in jail, of which 2 suspended, and has been barred from partaking in French politics for the next 5 years. That means that she's been barred from running against Macron for the position of the president of France. She's been convicted for allegedly embezzling European funds, misusing European funds for her national fraction of the party instead of the European fraction of the party, which I dare to bet money on the fact that if any judicial system in any European country would launch an investigation into left-wing parties to see if they were doing that let's say 80% of them would be found guilty of the same thing, because I used to work in the European Parliament, and trust me, this is something that I think happens a lot more than they want you to believe. And of course, we will never know that because they don't launch investigations into left-wing parties, because the whole aim of this is to crush the right wing in Europe, because we're growing too fast. And so the system, the cabal, needs to come down on us through another way. And what do? Lawfare. They're banning us. They're banning our parties. They're banning politicians from running. They're convicting us of hate speech and hate crimes. That's how they do it. That's the new strategy.
Okay,
so that's from the Rubin report. Give him credit there. I'm really glad that worked, guys. I won't go on about it now. It's a new thing for me to insert a video. Now I know how to do it, so maybe I'll be able to do a bit more of that in future. Back to our slides. Let's pull them up again. And yes, I believe. Yes, now this is me. I've written this, guys. This is a quote. This is to try and help people just understand. For decades now, lawfare has been used by devious and scheming authorities against the common people, especially against those who pose any sort of threat to the nefarious operations of governments. And there on the right-hand side is Chelsea Manning, no relative as far as I know, Julian Assange, and Edward Snowden, of course, some of the more famous ones. But I know dozens more, literally, who didn't hit the news as big. Now they are using the same type of lawfare, where the process often is the punishment. Remember, I've spoken about this before, friends. They're just trapping you in the judicial cycle is enough to destroy your life. Even if they know they're never going to get you at the end of it, they'll just put you through the system as a warning to everybody else, So it's the process often is the punishment to go after major international political figures. So now they're using it to go after these major international political figures. With all of the associated publicity and public outrage, I am predicting that we are now seeing the beginning of the end of corrupt courts and politically appointed judges. By that, I mean, I don't see society transitioning away completely from the need for courts while humanity grows up and learns to behave itself, so to speak. But what I am saying, and I have been thinking about this for many years, we already have for instance, People's Tribunal of Ireland, but without the enforcement powers, alternatives, and even the same, alternatives aren't much use. The same though with the Irish court system, the French court system. It's the courts themselves have very little in the way of power. It's the enforcers, the police, the prisons, the punitive measures that are taken, and all of those people, of course, are just doing my job, sir. Many of them have parked their consciences and they just do as they're told. So here now, I pull up. Now, this is a slide. If you haven't seen this, guys, if you're curious, maybe you don't know who I am. Maybe you haven't really understood the full story. And in fact, this isn't even the full story. But back in 2017, a reporter, an independent German reporter, came out and interviewed me. Now, this is in the failure of any Irish media outlet to do a proper story. We had one or two that's about some of the more sort of startling abuses of power and authority. But I was a soccer referee at the time. There's the play on the, Irish referee does time for blowing the whistle on corruption. So there's the whistleblowing attitude. And I'll just read the bit on the right here. Stephen Manning is battling corruption in Ireland. 4 years ago, he founded an organisation, Integrity Ireland, that has assembled a large body of evidence showing that the police and other state agencies are massively abusing the Irish public. Absolutely true, guys. Yet when activists and whistleblowers turn to the courts for recourse, they find themselves blocked and obstructed at every turn. This is the story of a seemingly hopeless struggle for justice. And if anybody is genuinely interested in reading that, there's the link at the bottom there, guys. Put in that text, Cicero article, Walls of Stone, and that will come up. Please, it's about 12 pages. It'll give you a good understanding of how and why, for example, I was jailed in the first place, and what the Integrity Ireland Association was all about. It's still up there. The website is still up there. There's a lot of information. I can't remember now, 60 or 70 web pages with a lot of associated videos and information that is still pertinent today, although some of the names in it, of course, some of the judges have retired and things like that. But it's the same thing, guys. Same thing has happened to Donald Trump in America, happening to Le Pen here. Now, I'm not saying in any particular case that any particular individual is pure as the driven snow and hasn't committed any crimes. As a matter of fact, my challenge to any of you listening to me right now is to say to yourself, if you are being followed by the police or the secret services, or your phones or your internet was being tapped continuously, or if when you were driving down the road, the minute you went 1 mile an hour over the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, or whatever it might be, technically you've just committed a crime, and they have a right to prosecute you. But what this is not happenstance criminality. This is the system going out of its way to target individuals. And once they do that, there's hardly a soul here can escape, because believe it or not, we're already tangled up in these diabolical pyramids that I call them the diabolical systems. We're already tangled up just by virtue of the fact that we live in this world today, and we have to engage with so many corporations and governments and agencies that are in and of themselves technically and definitively operating on the evil end of the scale. And again, I do different presentations about this, guys. I know I'm repeating myself sometimes, but it's important to keep doing so, so that the message gets across. Now, yes, this is one of those that I'll repeat. And again, when I do this, guys, I invite you to freeze the slide. I'll make it full there for a moment. I invite you to freeze the slide and come back to it and read it, okay? But very briefly, I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to give you a quick synopsis, okay? What we're looking at here is the argument that, generally speaking, I like to do everything's in threes, this concept, plan, action idea equates to spirit, mind, body, to God, feminine and masculine, and to many, many other things, electron, neutron, and proton, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of this, right? But it's called the original principle. That's the logo up on the top right there. But in order to commit really, three necessities for evil. First of all, there's the urge to dominate, which is known as sociopathic or psychopathic behavior, okay? Secondly, the means to dominate, which usually requires structures and systems, except for, in a case where you're a big, strong man with evil intentions and your victim is smaller and less helpless than you. But usually, certainly systemically evil needs these structures and systems. And thirdly, there are material rewards for that domination, okay? And there's that list of vices down on the left, okay? So those are autocratic hierarchies tend to work this way. And then over on the right, three necessities for good. There's the urge to nurture, which equates to empathetic behavior. There's an individual decision to nurture. In other words, you just decide, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to be kind to people. I'm going to, do whatever it is. And thirdly, the nurturing act is its own reward. You don't necessarily, excuse me, of course, there are organizations, but that start out with good intentions. But the problem is, in the world we live in today, with the way society has, let's call it evolved or devolved, the way that society is set up, it is very hard to have any organization that has to interact with other organizations, with accounts, taxes, raise money, funding, and all the rest of it, without compromising the original ethos. The one way you don't have to compromise the original ethos, like if I decide I want to give a beggar in the street a fiver, okay, nobody's around, nobody's watching, he may not even be looking up at the time, and I'll pop it in his pocket or in his cup and walk away, right? The reward for me is the fact that I've just done something good, all right? Or I've helped somebody else, and it's, you know, if they see me and they say thank you, that's an additional little reward. That's, you know, part of the rewards package. But if it's the doing of the right thing is its own reward. You don't need to get medals for it. You don't need to be paid for it. You just do it. Now, if you're in a job where you can do that as well and get paid for it, well, that's even better still. That's when it becomes more like a vocation than just a job. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on too much here, guys. The next one too is one of the old ones. Again, just have a look at this. Freeze it, guys. That's the same values that you saw a little bit earlier, but this is about the evil side of things, okay? Authoritarian systems, authoritarian versus democratic. And hardly anybody has thought about this and realized that almost all political parties are autocratic in their structure, but they will hijack democratic mechanisms to get themselves into power. But once they're in power, they revert to the autocratic, which is towards the evil end of the scale. It's somebody else ordering you what to do. It's all right if it's God himself or a saint of some sort. But even then, if it was God himself or a saint that was in charge of the organization, they would be encouraging everyone to lift them up to the same level of conscious decision-making as themselves. They wouldn't be dominating and forcing them down, okay? So please freeze these. And I think I've got one similar more coming. Yes. And then finally, again, in diagrammatic form, what we're just showing you here again, guys, is that collaborative systems. Now, you see in the middle, the little white, blue, and red circles. Those represent the concept, the plan, and the action. Okay. If the concept is good, the plans will be good, the action will be good. All right. Whereas on the right-hand side, you've got the diabolical pyramid. That's most of our structures and associations in the world are made like this. And they are intrinsically diabolical. And again, I keep doing different presentations about this, but we'll scoot on today. You freeze and read back to them on them, guys, if you need to do so. So why has the European Union kept silent on Serbia's massive protest movement? Now, you haven't heard much about this, have you? No, not unless you're in Serbia, of course, or on the, the free press side of things, the independent media side of things. Hundreds of thousands of Serbians take to the streets of Belgrade to protest what they describe as rampant corruption and cronyism in President Alexander Vucic's government. The European Union is once again facing accusations that it's putting its economic interests ahead of the values it preaches. So the European Union is preaching democracy and the rule of law, but it's turning a blind eye to dictatorial agenda of this guy. And why? Well, ultimately, it's because the European Union itself is becoming a dictatorial, diabolical, top-down pyramid structure that has to masquerade as being benign and helpful and forward-thinking and democratic in order to trick everyone into it. But it's an experiment that's not going to work, guys. I can say this categorically. There's going to be a lot of suffering in the process, but it's not going to work. Not as long as you have liars and crooks like von der Leyen there heading it up. She talks about him as her dear Alexander for delivering on reforms, in particular on the fundamentals, on law and the rule of law and democracy. Nonsense. They just lie. This is their career liars and moral deviants. I keep saying this, guys. I hope people are listening to me. I'll scoot through a few of them, guys. So why, again, all I'm saying again here, he's described as highly authoritarian. That's why they're not challenging him, is because it suits them what he's doing, okay? We're just showcasing a few of the different ones here now. Here we go, down on the left, and this is a tweet from Herman Kelly of the Irish Independent Party. I believe I got that right, Herman. Apologies if I didn't. Ursula von der Leyen threatens Poland and Hungary. In France, Marie Le Pen sentenced and barred from running in the elections. Let's see the democracy in all this, yeah? In Romania, the elections have been cancelled. The winning candidate arrested and imprisoned. We'll show you that in a minute. In Germany, preparations for a similar scenario against the AfD party. Slovakia, assassination attempt against anti-war Prime Minister Robert Fico. Now, this will be anti-Ukrainian war, of course. And Hungary, Viktor Orban, continued attacks against Orban and pressure to exclude Hungary from EU discussions. So I asked myself, well, what's going on here? And you poke a little bit. And then I found this organization called FACRIS, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And they are down at the bottom. I've circled one of them. We'll have a look at them in a moment. You know, I can't read it very clearly from here. The International Cult Studies Association, I think, or Cultic, right? So FACRIS, what is it? I think your man here comments on it. Oh, all right, that's just a quick slide. There's their logo, top center. These are some of the countries that are involved in this at the moment that seem to be getting targeted. You know, if they're not pulling the sledge in the same direction as Ursula von der Leyen and her cohorts of unelected representatives. Yes, here we go. So this man, Michael or Michael Thompson, okay, he writes the following. Freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, enshrined in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, remain attainable ideals for many European politicians. The question arises, who or what hinders their realization? The answer is partly hidden in the structure and activities of FECRIS, European Federation of Centres of Research and Information on Cults and Sects, no less. An organization that is gaining more power and influence each year. So they say. Now, that's the one I circled, the one top. ICSA, Cult Information since 1979. We'll have a look at them just in a second because I want to actually make a solid point. Just a quick point here, guys. Now, this is a snapshot from the FECRIS website at the bottom. FECRIS is an international non-governmental organization. That's a lie. Next one. FECRIS was granted participative status with the Council of Europe in 2005. That's true. It enjoys special consultative status with the United Nations since 2009. That's true. This should all be very unsettling, guys, all right, when you see this. And finally, participates in the Fundamental Rights Platform of the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights since, now it says participates. What's their participation exactly? Let's have a look. Let's go a little bit further, all right? Now, remember, they just said that they're a non-government organization, right? It's a top, look at this again. It's a non-profit association under French law. Again, playing with words, lies under any other, they're lies, guys, okay? It's a politically, philosophically, and religiously neutral organization. Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. I wish that we could bring in an international law that simply said, if you are a public servant, or you're a civil servant, or you're in any position of power and authority that's answering to the public, and you lie, not just huge, massive documented lies like this, but if you lie and you're caught out in a lie, there's an immediate reprimand. It should be, you know, a bit like playing soccer and committing a foul. You know, you get suspended. You're silenced for a month or 6 months. And if the lie is egregious enough, you face criminal penalties, yeah, and imprisonment, okay? Now, interestingly, though, it's a non-dogmatic association which does not judge individual religious or philosophical choices, but stands by the victims. Well, hold on a minute. If you're already painting people as victims of certain practices, then you're already taking sides, fools. Anyway, that doesn't really matter because then I saw the Human Rights Without Frontiers noted that all of a sudden their membership collapsed from 57 to just 19. Why was this? Well, again, it's about the great lie. All of a sudden they were caught out, and I won't go into all today because we'll be here for hours. But first of all, here you go. You see it receives over 92% of its funding comes from the French government, the French state. All right? So much for being an international non-government organization. You know, the lies are just over here on the right. It's a non-profit, international, non-governmental organization. Lie, lie, lie. The words don't mean anything. They just don't mean anything. As I keep saying, words are only metaphors. Truth is its own witness. All right. Now, these people at the top are holding them to account, but stop the state funding of anti-religious activities. So they're basically an anti-religious movement. Now, why would they be an anti-religious movement? Well, here very briefly, just to throw back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, some of these slides are a little bit superfluous, but this is the far right, so-called far right candidate Kalin Georgescu, sorry if I got the name wrong, banned from presidential bid. All right. Why? Well, they've got an agenda, haven't they? They've got Agenda 2030. You know, they don't want these guys being flies in the ointment and spanners in the works. Here we have at the top some of those flies in the ointment, some rather bigger and noisier than others. You know, Trump and J.D. Vance, Conor McGregor, arguably, you know, having a go at the Irish presidency. Below him there, you see Simon Harris. They're very well. I said they're very worried, but look at all the attacks against McGregor already in the press. Tommy Robinson on the right, convicted of journalism. Yeah, he's facing problem again. You see the process, the legal process is often the punishment. And Marine Le Pen over there on the right, Sarkozy. You know, some of these people at the bottom, honestly, yeah, I have to rein in my urge to describe them the way they really are. But anyway. Here's another one in Turkey. Again, we won't stay on this very long, but a man called Ekrem İmamoğlu, if I got that right, he was the Lord Mayor of Istanbul, I think, and Erdogan, who's also another dictator, and you know, he has jailed him. Now, again, there may or may not be, like I said, it's the selective targeting. It's not about saying everybody's angels on one side and all the other guys are baddies, but there's some truth to it. Now, here again, here's Viktor Orban. The EU now are pushing to strip Hungary's veto. He's the president of, is it the European Commission at the moment? I forget, there's one of the bodies there anyway, rotating presidency. So he decided to invite Netanyahu in face of an international criminal court warrant or declaration that he was, you know, he was convicted or arguably convicted of war crimes. So he's defied the arrest warrant, invited Netanyahu to Hungary, and describes the here at the bottom. They were a founding member of the International Criminal Court, but they're the first European Union nation to pull out of it. During a joint press conference, Orban asserted that the ICC had become a political court. Surprise, surprise. He added that the court's decisions to issue a warrant against the Israeli leader clearly showed this, and he called it anti-Semitism. Now, we won't get into a debate about Gaza and the Israelis and the Palestinians, far too complex. I've done other presentations on this before, but it's the point that they're defying the International Criminal Court. Why? Because they can. Because as I said earlier, my friends, they've got no, it's like saying to, oh, Russia, you've been convicted by the International Criminal Court, Putin, you know, of being a bad boy. And then you go, so what? I've got more tanks and guns and nuclear bombs than you have. So I'm either going to keep doing what I want or, well, what does it matter? It's all pretense, guys. You might say, well, what else have we got? Well, look, for instance, here in Ireland, yeah, we set up this thing we call the People's Tribunal of Ireland. We only did one case in it where I held a judge to account for violating my fundamental rights. But it's a paper result. It has some power and value, and maybe at some point in the future, God willing, we'll have time to return to that and show people how they can use this in the corrupt Irish courts to effectively dismantle the Machiavellian mechanisms that pass as so-called law over here. Okay, so we'll keep going, guys. I've got a lot of slides as usual, so we'll keep bumping through them. Only spend a minute or two on this as well. Now, you saw earlier that I said this Phrases organization is set up as basically as an anti-religion organization. And even though there's arguments about how powerful and not powerful, I checked some facts. Some of the so-called organizations in it haven't made an appearance online since 1990. You know, some are only one person or two people, but they're drawing down all these funds and they're very active online. And, you know, but as you see here, Japan and the United Nations, right? They swore to support international human rights and all the rest of it. But at the same time, here's the middle one, Taiwan, France, Japan. Why did a reaction hostile to religious liberty manifest itself almost at the same time in these countries and other democratic countries, but not all of them, in the late 1980s and 90s? Very interesting. Well, I'll say, why is this interesting? Now, it's all to do with the little angel and devil logo over there on the right. I'll tell you what that picture at the bottom there in the moment is. Because down there at the bottom, Geneva New Report, religious persecution in Japan. Now, I've mentioned this before because Noriko in particular, and how I got married to Noriko was affiliated with this unification movement. And interestingly, now I see the bigger picture here. The unification movement is, when I say up in arms, they've never been convicted of a crime, okay? But there's been a dissolution order against them in Japan because there's a popular sort of anti-cult movement in Japan, which has, with the weight of the government and these so-called NGOs and everything behind it, they've been able to manufacture basically reasons and excuses for shutting down what is, by any other standard, it's sort of a religious movement that is sort of beyond reproach, because all religious movements are always looking for converts, and they go about it in various different ways. But I know a lot about that particular movement, and I can say with a certain amount of confidence and certainty that any faults or failings that have occurred, because remember, I've said this before, religion by itself cannot possibly be perfect. It's like medicine, okay? You take the medicine until you don't need to take it anymore, then you put the medicine aside. That's what religion is supposed to be doing. Unfortunately, people either get addicted to the medicine, or some people misunderstand when I say things like this, and they throw the medicine away before it's done what it needs to do. In other words, I'm not saying that religion is neither necessary or hugely important in the historical sagas, but it's been terribly misused and abused, just like medicine is too today. It's been terribly misused and abused and misunderstood. But ultimately, what you can say with confidence is that it's almost impossible for any religious movement, no matter how good they're trying to be, if they integrate with the rest of the global institutions, you're going to be able to find fault. Because that very act of integration or association or mingling or even trying to get converts from the secular world or from, that is a compromise of sorts. So short of building your own island and living on it and not letting any sociopaths and psychopaths on it, and having God in charge type of thing, Now that's interesting enough. That's why that picture down there on the bottom right is important, I think, because it was only 2 weeks ago that they issued this dissolution order in Japan, okay, about 2 weeks ago. And interestingly, let's say less than a month anyway after it, so that, I think it was the 25th, it was just about a week ago. So 3 weeks later, this sanctuary in the bottom right, now that is, if you like, it's a very, very impressive temple palace that has been built by the Unification Movement, which, remember now, even though it's known as the Unification Church, it was supposed to be a movement that united all of the Christian denominations. That was the original intention of the founders. And it was remarked at the time when it became a church in its own right, this is certainly not the best, it's second best. But symbolically speaking, and again, this is possibly symbolically very important, because I've been saying for some time that we've moved into the 7th millennium. And the number 7 is very important. So we're in that 7,000 year of biblical history. Don't get into anthropology and everything now, guys. We're in that 7,000 year of biblical history. We had arguably, again, according to the Bible, 4,000 years to Christ. That's symbolically important. Then 2,000 years. And then it's supposed to be the rise of the feminine divine and all that. Now, I've been talking about this for many years. I've written about it in books. Most people it went over their heads until the COVID thing hit. Now everybody's starting to wake up. I say, yes, it's the age of wisdom, which is what? The feminine. It's the feminine aspect of the divine. Wisdom is the blue element, the feminine, the chakra here, the communications chakra. Okay, action is the masculine one. So spirit, mind, body, God, wisdom, and activity. Okay, that's supposed to be. So we've moved into that time. And very interestingly, this temple is being dedicated next Saturday as the sort of the dwelling place, if you like, for at least the concepts of the eternal divine feminine and the eternal divine masculine in union, which is what went wrong at the fall, blah, blah, blah. It's all very interesting. Another discussion for another day if there's enough interest. But it wouldn't do any harm, guys, to investigate this. It's in a place called Chungpyeong in Korea. And it's quite an achievement, I have to say, it's been ongoing for years. They've been building it. But the idea that next Saturday there's going to be this proclamation that we've now entered a particular time in history, that it's at least the symbolic end of fallen history, and now it's time for us all to keep doing things like this, understanding what the original principle is, which draws somewhat from what the unification is called the divine principle. But what is this original principle? How can we use it to shape society in the future? Let's bump on, guys. Okay, I don't think it's coincidence that all of this is happening. They're trying to shut the unification movement down in Japan, give other countries the right to do it. Why? Because, to emphasize the point, if you're the bad guy, you want religion to be obsolete, because it's the one method by which we can advance incrementally back towards the divine. Either that or get religions fighting each other, okay? But I see the sort of the woke left political movement as being, if you're going to choose between the two, the so-called, not the far right, meaning the extremists and the violent extremists and all that, but if you, at the moment, especially looking at American politics, between the Democrats and the Republicans, there's no doubt in my mind which side of the good and evil scale, generally speaking, they lie. We've got to be very careful, guys. We're in important times, and what we do and which side we choose will be... this shouldn't be here, guys. I'll just skip past that. Sorry, that's a mistake. Mother's Day, yes, there was a backlash after the Muslims in England insisted that Eid, the end of their fast, Ramadan, was more important than Mother's Day, and this guy gets quite annoyed and upset about it. We'll just breeze through this, guys. Us and the UK and other European countries, we are traditional Christian countries. Some of these festivals are very important for all of our politicians, like here, to be spouting pro. Now, again, I study world religions. Don't have a go at me about what I'm saying here. But the Islamic people that come to move to Ireland or to England, their first priority should be to understand, yes, this is not a Islamic country. By all means, go and worship in your mosques, but do so respectfully to the culture. Don't be making demands and insisting that, that you get preference and preferential treatment. But for some reason, our politicians are all kowtowing to them. The question is why. I argue it's because they're on the side of who. They want religious division and religious confusion as much as possible, because, to go back there briefly, sorry, the little guy, the man and the woman up there at the top, I've got the blue and the red. What I'm showing you again is spirit, mind, body. What they're trying to do is destroy the spirit aspect, our consciences, our connection with the divine, that gives us the power to say no to the diabolicals. All right, that's what they're trying to destroy, and this is one of the methods they're going to do it: culturally, religiously, politically. Okay, this man, I just popped that up there for you to go and see him, because he shows us that the immigration and crime rates here on the left in a UK study revealed the most dangerous migrants are from Congo, committing 1,500% as many violent crimes as Englishmen. Is that so? Now, there's similar charts for all different countries, guys. If that is so, then what's this tripe down the right-hand side? Debunking the myth of the migrant crime wave. U.S. immigration and crime questions answered by criminologists, CNN, again, on the Democrat-leaning side. Immigrants less likely to commit crimes than U.S.-born, yeah? Immigration and crime, what we know and what remains unknown. Now, I just put them in there to really, I'm asking the question, who do you believe? All right, we have to have the conviction, the strength of our own convictions, and when we're not sure about what's going on, we have to do the research, or rely on people like me and other good people to put the effort and time in to do it for you. I just want to make a mention of this one. Now, the top quote, the Taoiseach labels conduct of demonstrators as fascist. Now, that was a couple of years ago, and that was when demonstrators came to the Dáil and actually berated some politicians as they walked down the streets. Nobody was touched, right? They just sort of got in their faces and said, what's going on? Why are you doing X, Y, and Z? And outrageous things, But when you had mothers sat down, Mothers Against Genocide, they were strip searched, apparently, and there's the guards carrying them away. Now, why is that? The point I'm making again is the abuse of power and position by the so-called authorities, the hypocrisy, the switch aside whenever they feel like it. Here, the guards again, who are no doubt just doing their jobs. You've got to sit and think about it, guys, because one day you will meet your maker as well, and there'll be no excuse. You say, oh, well, I didn't know. Well, you should know, because there's enough of us out here now telling you that you've got to stop using that excuse. I'm just doing our jobs, you know. Then you have another protest, quite a clever little protest. They found a thing called the leprechaun laws, that basically leprechauns, dare I say, they don't really exist. I don't know if I can say that as an Irishman, but they've got protected status with some United Nations body or something like that. I mean, yeah, some sort of tap of the head to the Irish. I don't know. Anyway, it's a very clever thing. But when people saw these people protesting at the Dáil, the first thing people were saying up online was, this is not a generic, ordinary protest. And they were quite right. This lady, I put up a post basically denouncing them and saying, who sponsored this, And this lady, Mandy, says, stop trying to talk people out of trying. People need to be involved in politics on a level that can't be ignored. Agreed. Or the BlackRock politicians will brainwash and walk all over anyone. Ironically, Mandy, and I don't know if she was a paid shill or not, I answered her. I said, this is clearly a commercially sponsored campaign, Mandy, and not a genuine bona fide protest, right? It's clever, but deceptive, and very conveniently aligns with the government agenda. Now, these two companies, Folk VML and Lad Bible, are behind it, which most likely also means BlackRock and Co. So there's the irony that arguably it would be BlackRock who is sponsoring something like this ultimately, some way down the financial tracks. But notably, no guards came out and hauled them away by their hair or anything like that. Okay. Here's another example of in the UK. This again was late 2023. So, but again, as far as I'm aware, there was no action taken against them because at the time it suited the globalists to allow the pro-Palestinian, protests to swell and grow, right? Whereas down there below it, you've got the woman who was arrested for silently praying across. It's literally standing like that. She didn't have any posters or anything, no megaphone, nothing. She just stood quietly across the road and prayed in her mind. She was asked, as I recall, what are you praying or something? So they arrested her. Now, the good news about that is eventually the police had to pay out, I think, about 13,000, which went into a charity. But she then got dragged through the whole law and legal and courts and judicial process, But it just goes to show that people are just doing our jobs. Yeah, I was just driving the train to Auschwitz. Well done. Now, I just want to make a point here again about my buddy Donald, who I believe is, like I said, as long as he's allowed to operate with a certain amount of freedom, I think we're going to see more and more of this. Cannot be described as anything but good stuff. He's ordering a full audit for all members of Congress, some of whom are incredibly and suspiciously wealthy ever since they became politicians, and literally who's stealing from us. And then on the right, there's Kid Rock, who was, campaigning for ticket scalpers to be reined in. And Donald Trump's done it, So, this is good stuff. I watched that on getting my breakfast the other day on a video, It's all good stuff. He's not the monster that he's been painted out to be. He's a bit dogmatic. He's a bit belligerent at times, a bit rough around the edges, you might add. But as I've said before, doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, doesn't swear, doesn't do drugs. That's not a bad start, and seems to have a conscience. Okay, he seems to have a conscience and a genuine love and concern for his country. A patriotic event. I think that's all to be applauded and lauded. Why is Macron telling people to freeze their US investments whilst what it says here, amid EU-China deal? So now, as soon as they saw Trump was serious with his tariffs and his mandates and everything, what do? Immediately they turn to the old enemy, China. I thought China was the bad guys, China and Russia. Trust me, if it served their financial and monetary and sociopathic interests, they'd turn to Russia just as quick. Trust me, guys. All right. Sorry about that slide back there. Oh, yeah, quick one here. Just a very quick one on the whole gender thing. Funny enough, I'd removed some of these slides in a shorter version, but we'll run through them quickly. This was a fencing competition in the USA. And the circle I've got around, that's a man. in a woman's competition. All right, now how and why, we don't know. Has he had transgender surgery or whatever? I don't know. But last year he was fencing for the men's Olympic team. This year he came up against this girl and she just took a knee and basically refused to fight, And I'm saying good on her, Here on the left, there's William Thomas, ranked number 462 in men's swimming. There is Leah Thomas, ranked number 1 in women's swimming. Interesting they have the same surname. Oh, even more interesting is it's the same person. Yeah. Top right there and bottom right there again. Men who have undergone procedures are now calling themselves women and are dominating their, I think Trump was absolutely right again to say we're going to put all funding because it's simply unfair. And it's not to say there aren't genuine cases of gender dysphoria and stuff like that, which I explain in this presentation here. If you want to go and find it, guys, the gender question and universal law, it's up there. It's 12 slides, and it explains really that there are originally, the top right logo there again, there are 2 genders. Anything that does not align with that, none of us are perfect, by the way. None of us fit exactly the 100% mold of the perfect female or the perfect male. But that is the model we should aspire to, not anything in between. And trying to force it down our throats is playing into the hands of you-know-who. The diabolicals, the globalists, and the ungodly, I would say. So at the top, I've said, brave girl, stand up for your principles and for the original principle, top right. 2 genders, not more, not less. The woke, self-defining transgender ideology is not only antisocial in the most fundamental sense, it is grossly unfair and insulting to genuine women in all its forms. My opinion, my friends. Okay. She walked away with dignity. Now, I admire that girl, but as someone said, why don't all of you start, why don't all the women en masse just say, no, we just stop competing. If there's no competitions, there'll be no crowds coming to watch. A bit like Trump's tariffs. In the short term, it might hurt a wee bit, and there's a price to pay. But you know what? We all have to make a sacrifice. As de la Boite said back 500-600 years ago, there's people who know what's going wrong, but they lack the courage to make the sacrifices necessary to make a change, make a difference. All right. So now, who are these 2 beautiful creatures? Well, there on the left is a good friend of mine, Stephen Kerr, and on the right, Susan Delaney. They are partners in the running of the Irish Inquiry. And I'm just making a point here, guys. I think I'll showcase a few people now each week, the ones that I think are really doing good work and who deserve our support and acknowledgement. Very simply, this is about, the Trump administration being good guys and the Irish administration being sleazebags and sleazeballs, deceitful, so-and-sos. So Simon Harris and Micheál Martin, amongst others, I might add, they lied to try and get a secret court order forcing Twitter, to let the police spy on us. The good news is X did not comply. Good for you, Elon. All right. And whatever trash talk has been said about him as well, I believe. And again, I know he's got these great ideas about chips and flying to Mars and, and all this sort of stuff. Well, ideas on the standalone are often either as good or as bad as the people that implement them or use them, the tools and the ideas. So I would say give him a chance, But I think he's shown himself to be a great patriot as well in America and an honest and decent man. And I stand by that statement for the time being. Let's hope they don't get trapped in one of these diabolical pyramids that forces them into doing corrupt things as well. And, oh yeah, I know what's happened here. I've got, how many, I don't know how many more slides I have, but something's gone wrong here. I think, no, that's it. I never mind. As I was trying to do the video earlier, friends, what happened was I tried to upload it to the StreamYard platform, and I didn't know it, but I couldn't play this slideshow with the video embedded the way I had it. I didn't know that. As a consequence, I ended up doing about 5 or 6 different versions of this in order to try and get one small enough under the 50 megabytes to get all that. Anyway, I've worked it all out now, but there was one slide in there. I was showing people actually that if you get blocked on TikTok, not blocked, but if you have videos removed, because I've put up a whole load of short videos, but they're automatically AI generated. And I didn't realize actually that TikTok is more a platform for young people and for trivia and sort of short bursts and entertaining stuff. My stuff is a bit more serious. So for instance, this video now, I can run it through the StreamYard program and it'll automatically generate about 10 of these short, videos, anything from 20 seconds to about a minute and a half. And some of them are okay. They're automatically done. I just thought, yeah. So I just thought I'll just fling them up because I've got nothing else up on TikTok except for those. And we'll see how it goes. But automatically they were flagging a whole load of them just because of the titles. And what I had, which maybe I'll be able to show you next week, but what I had was 4 slides showing you that they blocked all these things. And I went in and I said, why? And I I basically went to the trouble of proving that they were wrong to do it. And they just came back and said, okay, ban lifted, ban lifted, ban lifted. 2 or 3 of them they kept on there. But then I asked myself the question, is it worth all this hassle? I don't even want to have a back and forth engagement. I know that nothing I'm saying is either a lie or hate speech. I might be expressing my disgust or my contempt for certain nefarious activities and for evil. If you don't hate evil, guys, then there's something wrong with you. When you see it personified or in institutions and you don't declare it as such, there's something wrong with you, all right? And the world has gone crazy temporarily. I hope we're coming back into sanity. But yeah, so I know I'm not saying anything hateful or a few things are a bit rough around the edges because I've had my experiences too, and I'm not that enthused about just forgiving and forgetting when I know these people are going to continue doing the same thing to other people as long as they're allowed to get away with it. Largely the politicians, largely corrupt judges, largely lawyers and that are in it for the money, for nothing else, no conscience, no morals, largely police, some of whom are outright thugs, others who have chosen to block their mind to the fact that they're taking a paycheck from nefarious actors and they're betraying the people they're supposed to originally serve. Anyway, friends, that's down to the last couple of minutes. And here we have the slide on the right. Those are some of the platforms you can go to if you're interested to find more of our materials, some of the books we've done. And there on the left, I don't know, again, what sort of a turnout to expect, but I just saw this. It popped up on my feed and just want to promote something good. These are this is to try and raise Irish cultural consciousness and awareness again. The Gardens of Remembrance, 2 p.m. on Saturday, April the 26th. If I get any more information on that, I'll put it up next week. And having said that, guys, I'll give you an extra free minute, all right, to go off and have your coffee or a pint or whatever it is. And thanks again to everyone for the support. And hopefully we will see you again next week. God bless.